thankful for this morning, don't we? Isn't it a joy to be able to have the freedom to gather in the name of liberty, the hope of the nation on the cusp of economic recovery, and the military might of a country that finally can allow the victims of 9/11 to rest in peace with the death of Osama bin Laden? We are also blessed in this great country to have a brand new crop of fresh conservative leaders, a group that can only be called a part of, I guess, the political sandwich generation, a group of public servants who have committed to taking care of their parents and an aging baby boom generation, the first of whom hit age 65 in January, and taking care of their children. So they are guaranteed to have an America at least as great as the one we knew as children. I am proud to say this morning that some of this fresh crop of American leader are my friends from Wisconsin. You know, the new chairman of the RNC, the man who will lead us through this great presidential parade in 2012 is Reince Priebus, my friend from Wisconsin. The chairman of the House Budget Committee, the man who has emerged as the object of Democrat fury over his insistence that we actually return to some fiscal responsibility, is Congressman Paul Ryan, my friend from Wisconsin. And the man I sat next to for months, poring over budget briefing papers before the world knew him as the one to restore Wisconsin's financial peace. Governor Scott Walker is my friend from Wisconsin. I met Governor Walker years ago when I was a journalist at WISN-TV in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He was a member of the Wisconsin State Assembly, and do you know that Governor Walker, at that time, Representative Walker, was one of my very best sources at the state capitol. But before he would become governor, he would become county executive of the largest county in Wisconsin, Milwaukee County. And before that could happen, the guy in charge in Milwaukee County, a Democrat there, had to mess up. And he was a crook of a man. I will tell you that because he had a pension scandal that would have awarded him and his cronies millions of dollars in a secret scandal, and the reporter to bust that bad guy on television camera was me. I like to argue to Governor Walker that I was his very first supporter for Milwaukee County Executive that day. Today, I'd just like to argue to Governor Walker that I am his biggest supporter. You all, absolutely. You all are his biggest supporters. They come not only from Wisconsin, but from all across the nation. And before the signs and the drums and the responsible budgeting in our state, we had to get elected. Now, in Wisconsin, we have separate primaries for the governor and for the lieutenant governor. And in my race, it was me and 4 men in an exhausting statewide race. And how many of you have ever been to or heard of a Lincoln or a Reagan Day dinner? Sure. By the end of the summer, I was starting to look like Lincoln or Reagan. And I had had so many chicken dinners, I thought for sure I would start to cluck, and my belly started to ache. Now, that belly aching could have been because I had out-fundraised all the guys in my race 2 times. Could have been all those chicken dinners I was having. It could have been the fact that I was voted upon and came in last in the Wisconsin State Convention GOP endorsement process. But it could have been that all my tiredness and my belly aching was coming from something else. It ends up, for me, the statewide campaign was the easy part. 2 weeks before the September primary last year, I was diagnosed with a grapefruit-sized tumor in my gut. I had colon cancer. Within days, I was taken for emergency surgery, and I got out hours before the polls closed on election night so I could cast my vote. And despite the naysayers, and despite the cancer, and despite the exhaustion of a 5-way primary, I beat the guys 22 points. And I'm also proud to tell you I finished up chemo last month. You know, the day after the primary showed me what a cool head Scott Walker really has on his shoulders. People often ask me how he reacted to 70,000 people chanting around the Capitol, the protesters, the death threats, and I tell them how he reacted when I told him that I had had cancer. The day after the primary, right before a joint press conference, I sat the now governor down and I told him that I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm ready to go, my guts are working, but I just got out of the hospital after a really big cancer surgery. And he said, okay. Like I had just told him he was having ham and cheese on white instead of ham and cheese on wheat. Unflappable, unshakable, and that is exactly the type of leader Wisconsin has. That is exactly the type of leader that Wisconsin needed. And we are blessed because we needed responsibility when it came to budgeting. We had a big budget problem to solve. You know, courtesy of the last administration, we were left with a $137 million budget hole in fiscal year 11. And our biennial budget, we were facing a shortfall of $3.6 billion. And you all know what came next, the budget repair bill. We asked our government employees to contribute 5.8% toward their pension plan, about the national average. We asked them to contribute 12.6% toward their health care, which is about half of the national average. And when you consider that our health care costs in the state of Wisconsin have risen 90% since 2002, it was a small solution and a small sacrifice. We also asked for some concessions in collective bargaining, which was another fiscal problem we needed to solve. We needed adult leadership, and Scott Walker delivered. I tell you this morning that there were others who delivered as well. Our brave conservatives, our Republicans in our legislature who stood behind and beside the taxpayers of Wisconsin for fiscal sanity when it came to our budget repair bill and our budget. They stayed there, did their jobs, while our Democrat senators absconded with their constituents' rights to be heard, planted themselves in hotel rooms in Illinois, and now it is our senators who are facing recalls. 6 of our state senators are facing recalls, my friends, and we need your help. 3 of theirs only are facing recall elections. A recall election is not for someone who did their job. And our state senators stayed and they voted and they were courageous and they did their job. So if you have an extra $1 or $2, we ask for your help. Please visit frontlinewisconsin.com. If you don't have an extra $1 or $2, but you have an extra moment or 2, call up your friends and ask how they can help in the Wisconsin recalls. And if you don't have $1, and if you don't have a minute, then I hope you have a prayer, because we need your help in prayer for the state of Wisconsin and the courageous senators who went to work and did their jobs. You know, for too long, Wisconsin's budget has been balanced with ridiculous magic tricks, shell games, one-time federal stimulus dollars, segregated fund raids. Governor Walker's budget asked for small sacrifices, gave tools to local jurisdictions and municipalities so that they could cope with the loss of state aid and balance their budget without raising taxes. What you saw in our budget repair bill and with our biennial budget was a shot across the bow for those people who believe it is a right of government to have credit card living. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not a right of government. That is our money. And this morning, I tell you, our president needs to hear that message too. When Standard & Poor's says that our nation is potentially going to be downgraded in its credit rating, and Moody's rates Wisconsin's budget credit positive, you know we need a national realignment. We have $14 trillion in debt in our national government, and our president is too partisan to acknowledge the fact that people like Paul Ryan and Scott Walker are right. The time for frugality and moderation is now. The time for adult leadership is now. The time to grow jobs is now. And that is exactly what we are doing in the great state of Wisconsin. In fact, we are aggressively pursuing entrepreneurs and innovators to come and join us in an administration that actually wants to invest in the success of job creators. Because during our campaign, Governor Walker and I pledged to help the private sector create 250,000 new jobs, because we know it is the private sector that creates the jobs in this country. And I am happy to report to you that from January until April, already Wisconsin's private sector has produced 25,000 new jobs. We are on track to hit our goal, and we want to fill 4 years full of those success stories, because you know just about every state in the nation is facing a fiscal crisis. Governor Walker chose to fix ours without raising taxes. Governor Quinn in Illinois, however, is a perfect example of a governor who has not met a tax he does not like. You know, he just raised income taxes 46 and 67%, and then he signed what's called an Amazon tax into law. Now, I read about this in the Chicago Tribune, and I noticed that there were 3 CEOs quoted in that newspaper article, and so I decided to Google them, call them up, and offer them greener pastures in which to grow jobs in the great state of Wisconsin. Greener pastures that had no Amazon tax, like in Illinois, that had no 9.75% sales tax, like in Illinois, that had no estate tax, like in Illinois, that had no prescription drug tax, like in Illinois, that had no food for consumption tax, like in Illinois, that had no energy in the winter for manufacturing tax, like they have in Illinois, and that had no Chicago Bears that lose to the world champion Green Bay Packers, like they have in Illinois. All right. We like to say that Wisconsin is open for business because we want to be a leader in the economic recovery. I have 2 little girls at home, Ella and Violet. They're 8 and they're 5. And I want to make sure that they have great opportunities in the state of Wisconsin so that when they graduate from school, they can stay in Wisconsin and find great family-sustaining wage jobs so they can live near me, not so near to me that they move back in with me, but close enough that I can just drop in whenever I want to. The reason we want to create a robust economy in Wisconsin and in this nation, the reason we need real leadership, the reason I ran for this job is for my children, for all of our children, our grandchildren. You know, my 8-year-old Ella told me one day, you know, Mom, you're like Hannah Montana, which is a really big compliment from an 8-year-old. She said, you've got your lieutenant governor life and you've got your mom life. And I thought about it, and I thought, you know, my lieutenant governor life really is my mom life. Because everything I do to bring prosperity and jobs to the state of Wisconsin and to this great country we live in is for the sons and daughters of this country, including my own babies at home. However, I will never be a secret pop star like Hannah Montana because you don't want to hear me sing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate your having me.